the committee have been processed. Invitations for responses from the relevant offices have been sent, and the committee is set to expeditiously deal with them as soon as they have received to ensure that they are dispersed with they're dispersed with bills, Mr. Speaker, sir. One bill is before the committee, which is the County Boundary Bill 2023, Senate Bill number 6 of 2023. The bill seeks to provide for a mechanism for the resolution of county boundaries dispute, as well as to give effective to Article 188 of the Constitution by providing for the procedures of alterations of county boundaries. The committee is presently carrying out public participation on the bill, and once all the views has been taken into account, we shall prepare and table its report before the House before 21st April 2023. County visits. Mr. Speaker, sir, the committee has undertaken visits to two counties, that's the Tharaka-Nithi County and Meru County. Mr. Speaker, the committee undertook the county visit to Tharaka-Nithi from 21st and 22nd to 21st January 2023 to ascertain the status of the delayed operationalization of the Gadwana town as the county headquarters. A report of the findings and the recommendations by the committee shall be tabled in the House. Honorable Speaker, I would also like to take this opportunity to inform the House that the committee had been concerned with issues that took place in Meru County government, since this is a critical matter that affects the governance and management of the county governments. In this interest of protecting the devolution, the committee had considered playing a mediatory role and wrangles between the county executive and the county assembly of Meru. Unfortunately, the process of impeachment of the county governor through petition by the county assembly had commenced before the committee could intervene. Mr. Speaker, I wish to, however, report that on 21st to 22nd January 2023, the committee undertook a visit to Meru County and held a successful engagement with the governor as well as with the members of the county assembly as a follow-up on how the county is moving on the aftermath of the impeachment trial of the governor. In this regard, I wish to assure this House of the commitment of the committee to enhancing and strengthening good intergovernmental relations in the counties, which it regards as the cornerstone for the success of devolution. Stakeholder engagement. Mr. Speaker, sir, the committee has held meetings with various stakeholders in the spirit of fostering good working relations with them. This includes the State Department of Devolution, the Intergovernmental Relations of Technical Committee, the County Assemblies Forum, the Council of Governors, the Senate Liaison Office, the Westminster Foundation for Democracy. Mr. Speaker, sir, the State Department of Devolution, which is a key player in the devolution space, I wish to inform the House that together we had fruitful discussions that set the tone for the strengthening of collaborations and buildings and robust engagement that aim to achieve the successful implementation of all functions that are devolved. Mr. Speaker, in recognition of the role of the Intergovernmental Relations Technical Committee plays as the state agency responsible for consultation, cooperation, and coordination of the two levels of government, the committee has held 3 meetings with agencies with the aim of collaborating on ways of deepening devolution and entrenching effective intergovernmental relations within the devolved system of governance. Mr. Speaker, sir, in appreciating the critical role the county assemblies play in legislation of the county affairs and oversight of the county executives, the committee has held 2 meetings with the county assemblies forum to identify the areas of support and collaboration with the Senate. I wish to inform the House that together we had fruitful discussions on areas of legislation and support, capacity enhancement, and opportunities for strengthening of intergovernmental relations for effective governance of county government. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Council of Governors is also a central player in the management and governance of devolution. In this regard, the committee has held a meeting with the Council and deliberated on areas and opportunities of collaborations for effectively implementing devolution. The committee continues to engage the Council in critical aspects affecting the counties and looks forward to a successful working relationship in this term of Parliament. Foreign visit. Mr. Speaker, sir, in ensuring continued capacity building for the institutional strength and competence in execution of its mandate, the committee attended a training in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, from 14th and 22nd up to 22nd, 2023, which was organized by the Eastern and Southern African Management Institute, ISAMI. The training was important in acclimatizing members with knowledge and skills on effective governance and management of devolution and equipped their leadership capacity as representative of the people. Inductions and work planning retreats. Mr. Speaker, sir, in order to give the members a deeper understanding of the committee's mandate and to prepare them for the huge task in the 13th Parliament, the committee held an induction and work planning retreat from 5th to 8th February 2023 in Naivasha, which gave also the senators an opportunity to interact with its various stakeholders as well as identify areas of priorities for the term of Parliament. Consideration of reports on review and assessment of committee performance. Mr. Speaker, sir, for continuous improvement and effective performance on its mandate, the committee has considered a performance assessment and review report that was conducted by the Senate Liaison Office in collaboration with the Westminster Foundation for Democracy, which identified the challenges that were clawing back on the performance of the committee in the previous Parliament. The committee is taking robust measures to implement the recommendations made from the report, which shall enhance and strengthen its effective delivery. Consideration of the 2023 budget policy statement. Mr. Speaker, sir, the committee considered the 2023 budget policy statement, the medium-term debt management strategy, on which it made critical observation and sustainable recommendations on the policies touching on the various fiscal challenges and risks that are facing the county government. The committee has committed its report on the standing committee to the Standing Committee of the Finance and Budget and hopes that the committee takes into account its recommendation. Oversight the implementation of the Urban Areas and Cities Act number 13 of 2011. Mr. Speaker, sir, in line with the fulfillment of its mandate, the committee is determined that urban areas and cities in the country are governed and managed in the manner contemplated in Article 184 of the Constitution. To this end, fulfill the provisions of the Urban Areas and Cities Act number 13 of 2011. Review of devolved sector laws that should be aligned to the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, sir, to ensure that all the devolved functions are smoothly performed by the counties, the committee is in the process of identification of the laws in the devolved functions, or devolved sectors that existed before 2010 Constitution, which needs to be reviewed so as to align to the Constitution. The committee has so far identified 79 laws in the different devolved sectors that need to be aligned into the Constitution as indicated here below in the table. 1, Land and Environment, 23 laws. Health, 20 laws.
Honorable Senator.
Yes, sir.
You're supposed to make your statement for not more than 10 minutes.
It's what it is. I'm almost finishing.
Pursuant to Standing Order
it's almost
51.
Over. I'm concluding. Yes,
You've already overshot the runway. Kindly conclude.
Yeah, okay.
And table your
Let me forget about the table. So, and in total, I have 79 laws to be reviewed, actually. Mr. Speaker, sir, it's important to note that this non-conformity of the devolved sector laws has been a huge clawback in the success of implementing the resolution. As such, the committee believes that its report on the matter will help the other Senate committees to have these challenges looked into and mechanisms providing for a solution put in place. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, the committee plans to carry out the following key activities in this session. Consideration of various legislative proposals and bills touching on devolution, a meeting with the Deputy President since the State Department of Devolution lies in his office, oversighting the implementation of the Urban Areas Act and Cities Act number 13 of 2011, review of the devolution sector laws should be aligned to the Constitution, review of the Intergovernmental Relations Act 2012 with the aim of making reviews on both relations between the national government and the county government. Finally, Mr. Speaker,
let it be final.
Sorry?
Your statement.
Undertake county visits to ascertain the status of various issues that are under the committee's mandate, and e.g. ascertaining of the implementation of the county headquarters whose construction was being supported by the national government, regular retreats with the key stakeholders, other non-state actors, i.e. the Society of Clerks at the table, the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, the Katiba Institute, etc., to ensure maximum engagement and collaboration that will steer the success of devolution. The committee shall also undertake other activities that are generally aimed at strengthening devolution. Finally, I wish to appreciate the Office of the Speaker, the Senate leadership, and Office of the Clerk of the Senate for the steadfast support they have accorded this committee. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Chairperson, Standing Committee on Education. The clerk, kindly time 10 minutes. Beyond that, let the microphone be switched automatically.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, though that will be disadvantageous to me. I want to make a statement, Mr. Speaker, relating to the activities of the Standing Committee on Education pursuant to Standing Order number 56-1B for the period between 14th of October 2022 and 30th March 2023. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to Standing Order number 56-1B to make a statement relating to the activities of the Standing Committee on Education for the period between 14th of October 2022 and 30th March 2023. Honorable Speaker, the Standing Committee on Education is established under Standing Order 2228-3 of the Senate Standing Orders and is mandated to consider all matters related to education and training. During the period under review, the committee held a total of 24 sittings, during which it considered 3 bills, 11 statements, 1 public petition, and tabled 1 report. 1 bills. Honorable Speaker, during the reporting period, the committee considered the following 3 bills. A, the County Vocational Education and Training Bill 2022. Honorable Speaker, the County Vocational Education and Training Bill 2022 was referred to the committee on the 8th of November 2022 following its introduction in the Senate by way of first reading. The committee facilitated public participation pursuant to the provisions of Article 118 of the Constitution and Standing Order 145.5 of the Senate Standing Orders, and prepared its report, which was subsequently tabled in the Senate. B, the Learners with Disabilities Bill 2023. The Learners with Disabilities Bill 2023 was referred to the committee on 7th March 2023, and the committee consequently facilitated public participation and has prepared its report, which is currently undergoing consideration and will be tabled in the Senate this week. C, the Kenyan Sign Language Bill 2023. Honorable Speaker, the Kenya Sign Language Bill 2023 was introduced in the Senate on 22nd March 2023 and thereafter stood committed to the Committee on Education pursuant to the provisions of Article 118 of the Constitution and Standing Order 145.5 of the Standing Orders of the Senate. The committee has invited interested members of the public and stakeholders to submit their representations on the bill for consideration during preparation of its report. 2 statements. Mr. Speaker, sir, during the reporting period, 11 statements were sought from the committee, and the committee considered and concluded 7 of these statements. In considering the said statements, the reports and responses received by the committee were shared with the respective senators who were also invited to attend and participate in the committee meetings. Honorable Speaker, the committee is currently considering the following 4 remaining statements and will conclude within the next 2 weeks. The reversal of delocalization of teachers policy in Embu County by the Teacher Service Commission sought by Senator Mundigi. B, scholarships on education programs between countries in Kenya and academic institutions outside the country sought by Senator Samson Cherargei. C, status of Kaimosi Friends University sought by Senator Geoffrey Osotsi. D, credibility of a course offered to Kenya immigrant workers by the NITA sought by Senator Tabitha Mutinda. Number 3, petitions. Honorable Speaker, 1 petition regarding the 1997 to 2007 retired teachers' claims was referred to the committee on the 8th of March 2023 and is currently undergoing consideration. The committee has received submissions from the petitioners and has identified and invited key stakeholders to a meeting with the committee to deliberate on the petition. The committee will conclude on this matter within the coming 2 weeks, prepare its report, and respond to the petitioner in line with the provisions of the standing orders. Number 4, committee induction and stakeholder engagement. Honorable Speaker, the committee conducted its induction retreat between 6th and 10th February 2023 and met with the stakeholders drawn from the Ministry of Education in order to understand education sector policy directions for each state department and agency, identify legislative gaps and priority areas for the 13th Parliament. Next, the committee further met with non-state actors and development partners to acquaint itself with their roles and functions in the implementation of the education sector policy and legal framework. During other engagements with stakeholders, the committee also received submissions and views on different legislative and other business under its consideration. 5, county oversight visits. Honorable Speaker, the committee is scheduled to conduct county oversight visits during the recess in May to add to the evidence gathered during consideration of different legislative business that have been brought to its attention. Mr. Speaker, notably, the committee will be seeking to confirm the reports received from the Council of Governors and the Salaries and Remuneration Commission, SRC, on the plight of teachers and caregivers in the counties countrywide. The committee believes that these county visits will also provide first-hand evidence and avail an opportunity for extended public participation. Honorable Speaker, in conclusion, I wish to thank your office and the office of the Clerk of the Senate for the continuous support extended to the committee in the conduct and execution of the mandate. Lastly, I wish to thank the members of the committee for their diligence and contributions during committee activities. I thank you, the perfect example of keeping time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senators. Before I give members time to make comments on those 3 statements by the chairs of those standing committees, allow me to make the following communication. Honorable Senators, I would like to acknowledge the presence in the Speaker's Gallery this afternoon, a visiting delegation from the United States of America. They are in the Senate as guests of Senator for Makueni County, Senator Daniel Manzo, MP. Honorable Senators, I request each member of the delegation to stand when called out so that you may be acknowledged in the Senate tradition. These are Griffith Morgan, Member of Congress, Virginia State. Sarah Jacobs, Member of Congress, California State. Janti Suripto, CEO, Save the Children. Griffith Hillary, member of the delegation. Glenson Christie, member of the delegation. And Laws Arion Michelle, member of the delegation. Honorable Senators, on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, I extend a warm welcome and wish you a fruitful visit. I will allow the Senator from Makueni to say a very brief word of welcome, and also Senator Ledama. Very brief, Senators.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are very delighted to welcome this team. There's a bigger team, Mr. Speaker. There are 26 of them, and yesterday went to Turkana County, particularly Kakuma camp. They are in a mission in the country to promote education and especially disadvantaged children. That's why they are accompanied by the CEO of Save the Children Fund of the United States. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I'm a beneficiary of Save the Children Fund UK, which took me to school through Saray Boys Center, then be fundraised by Princess Anne. And they are concentrating on the plight of the children and their education in the Kakuma camp and any other camps in the country, and any other disadvantaged children who deserve education, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the congressman from Virginia is in the Committee of Energy in the Congress, and Sarah, who is a Congress lady from California, is in foreign relations. And the congressmen and women have teamed up with those other organizations so that they can do something for Africa and for the children of Africa and the rest of the world in relation to education as their passion. And they also have visited Masai Mara and are going to be here for a few more days and will visit other places. Recently, Senator Chris Coons was in town, and I was lucky to host him in one of the occasions for dinner, and you know he did a lot of work in the bipartisan process we are looking at the country. If you look at the current congressman and congresswoman, they are also from two different political parties. One is a Republican, the other one is a Democrat, and they are very bipartisan, even the way they conduct activities when they are serving the nation and serving the world. So, Mr. Speaker, I take this opportunity to welcome them, and I'm sure one or two other senators will join us as we have a cup of tea after this so that they can interact more. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I join you and my colleagues in welcoming the two Congress persons from the United States of America to this great Republic of Kenya. I'm very happy that you're working with Save the Children. I'm aware and I'm actually very conversant with the work that they do. And I'm very happy that you got a chance to visit the Masai Mara. I represent Narok County, which is with the greater Masai Mara Game Reserve. I'd like to welcome you again to consider assisting young girls and boys from the Masai Mara region, from Narok County. We're heavily affected by the drought, which has completely devastated homesteads, and it's a big challenge for us. And I hope that when you're here, you can be able to also visit Kajiado County and see how they've been greatly affected. I requested to welcome you because America is my second home. And I know the amount of work that you do, and to see two congresspersons from the Republican Party and the Democratic Party working together is something which is going to assist us a lot here in learning to be bipartisan. Just like the United States, the Senate of the Republic of Kenya and the National Assembly are growing heavily apart to be two different distinct bodies. We represent the interests of our counties. They represent the interests of their districts or their constituencies, which I'm sure you represent. It's a bit different how we represent people here. Our term is about 5 years. I know yours is about 2 years, but we do the same work. So enjoy your time here in Kenya, and I hope that you will be able to send more good things about Kenya and have more foreigners, especially from the foreign committee, come to Kenya. Kenya is a good country. I also serve in the Energy Committee in the Senate, and I'm happy that we can be able to relate. Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Chiranke. Senator Enoch. Yeah, your comments on the reports, the 3 reports that have been read out.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to take this opportunity to congratulate the chairman, the Committee on Agriculture, where I sit. Mr. Speaker, I asked to comment on this issue because, yes, it is true that Article 118 of the Constitution requires that committees of Parliament conduct public participation in the process of handling bills and legislation. And the requirement there, Mr. Speaker, is direct to Parliament that those committees shall be facilitated to undertake public participation. Mr. Speaker, we need as a House to define that facilitation properly. Because, Mr. Speaker, in the process of dealing with one of those bills there, that committee almost landed into some trouble. We went into a place in my county, and because the people of Kitui love their senator, when they heard that we were coming for public participation on the Ndego bill, which they also grow in large numbers. Mr. Speaker, a public participation that we expected would have maybe a maximum of 100 people. We ended up with more than 1,200 people. We processed the bill, but of course, Mr. Speaker, you know, situations in our country are what they are. We had to find a way of taking care of the people that came for public participation. Mr. Speaker, if the Senator of Kitui and the Chairman of the Agriculture Committee were not men of means, I don't know what would have happened to the image of the Senate on that day. So let us define that public participation for committees. When they go out to meet people for public participation, what kind of facilitation do we need to afford to the committee so that the image of the Senate is also not dented? On the statement, the report by the Devolution Committee, and the chairman is gone, but let it just go on record. The Speaker is to insist that this House is the anchor of devolution. If we don't get it right here, then we won't get it right anywhere else. In that report, I would have wanted to hear the Speaker, and it's not late, they can do it in the second, the next report. Situations where the committee, suo motu, on their own motion, reach out to county governments. And you know, county governments, we talk about county governments, we talk about the executive and the assemblies. And the places to engage the Speaker for the benefit of the committee would be the COG. They should have a lot more conversations with the COG and the county assemblies forum so that they understand what issues the assemblies and the executives are going through and see how to intervene before we get to levels of impeachment and other instances that may not paint devolution in very good light. So, Speaker, I thank you.
Senator Mungatana.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to comment on the statement by the Committee on Agriculture. Mr. Speaker, my congratulations to the work they have done so far. But just a brief one and a quick one, Mr. Speaker. The committee omitted a very critical issue which I wanted to hear on. Mr. Speaker, like the previous honorable member who has spoken, I think the committees and the committee chairman, because they will read this on record, they need to know that we are very concerned as a Senate that a lot of money is remaining at the headquarters of the Ministry of Agriculture. And yet, agriculture is a devolved function, Mr. Speaker. We want to hear what efforts the chairman is making with his Committee of Agriculture to ensure that more money is coming down, because we have continued to have this complaint, we have continued to raise this concern, and where we can connect and put matters on record, Mr. Speaker, we are not seeing movement. It's not enough, Mr. Speaker, for the chairman to come and tell us we processed 2, 3, 4 bills, we did this and the other statements. What about their own suo motu movement to make sure that the anchor of agriculture is actually devolved, Mr. Speaker? 70% of the people of Kenya are employed in that sector. And these are in the counties, not in the towns. And we are not hearing much going on, Mr. Speaker, from their side. Mr. Speaker, we need to hear this in their next report. How have they engaged with the COG? How much money is coming down? And how are we benefiting in the counties, Mr. Speaker? In particular, rural counties like Tana River County, Mr. Speaker, we need the money to come away from the national government where the policymakers, and it should roll down to the counties. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. We are now moving to statements pursuant to Standing Order 52-1. Senator Crystal Asige.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 52-1 to make a statement of topical concern commemorating World Autism Awareness Day and Month. Mr. Speaker, World Autism Awareness Day is a global event observed annually on the 2nd of April and continues throughout the month. Its main purpose is to highlight the need to improve the quality of life for persons, I'll go again. Autism spectrum disorder is a developmental disorder characterized by behavioral and communication challenges that impact a person's ability to navigate social interactions and also causes their repetitive and restricted behavior. Mr. Speaker, autism spectrum disorder is a developmental disorder characterized by challenges to communicate that impact their ability to navigate social interactions and also causes their restricted behavior. The first historical appearance of the word autism was made in 1911 by the psychiatrist Eugene Bleuler. It was in 1943 when pediatric psychiatrist Dr. Leo Kanner characterized autism as a social and emotional disorder. And in 1944, Hans Asperger published his article where he described autism as a disorder of normal intelligence children who simply have difficulty with social and communication skills. These articles were an important contribution to the studies that helped to classify autism as a disorder, separate from schizophrenia. Mr. Speaker, it is important to note that as children with autism grow older, they face multiple obstacles because many do not speak or write or identify social cues as you or I do. They often become targets for bullies or are excluded altogether. Children with autism are also vulnerable to kidnapping, getting lost, or even drowning because they are prone to wander from homes and schools. Because of their inability to communicate, they struggle to tell someone their name, where they're from, or where they live. Additionally, autistic adults in our neurotypical society are more likely to be isolated, uneducated, underemployed, or unemployed completely. Mr. Speaker, only recently has autism spectrum disorder become recognized in Kenya. It is true that some behaviors of those with autism can be eccentric and therefore misunderstood, but they are not violent or evil. Luckily, over the past few years, autism awareness has slowly spread throughout the country. Global statistics show that 1 in 88 children will be diagnosed with autism. But it is even more alarming to note that more children will be diagnosed as autistic than with cancer, AIDS, and diabetes combined. Mr. Speaker, autism affects approximately 4% of the Kenyan population. And in an effort to be inclusive of autistic learners, the first unit was established in City Primary School in Nairobi in September 2003 by a group of parents with autistic learners. The unit currently has 40 learners whose ages range between 3 and 16 years. This is just a small percentage, however, of the over 500 learners within the Nairobi area alone who have been assessed and found to be autistic, but it is certain that there are more. Mr. Speaker, this means that most non-disabled children during their school years will come into contact with autistic learners. When this happens, it is our responsibility to make sure that they are understanding, accepting, and do not discriminate against those who are different from them. It goes without saying that public policy and sensitization is incredibly important through the Ministry of Education for teachers of autistic children to exercise more than anyone else, as this is an essential prerequisite for effective classroom management. Mr. Speaker, while the day celebrates the stories and lives with those with autism, it's important to remember that this is a lifelong condition with varying degrees of severity. Therefore, therapy for autistic learners would be best offered in schools because without it, it gives rise to further disadvantages to them and their families. Being that a lot of autistic learners are currently not receiving any therapy, as it is only offered in main government hospitals, it means that parents are forced to choose either frequent requests to their employers for days off, to travel long distances for therapy and risk losing their jobs, or left with no choice but to leave their autistic learners at home to fend for themselves. This is an unfair choice to be forced to make and can be resolved through integration in schools, inclusivity, and medical support right there in government schools, which have a better footprint across the country. With schools being in charge of educational progress and consistency with regard to attendance and interventions, a lot of autistic learners can grow up to be successful and independent members of society once therapy is made accessible and affordable to them within schools. Mr. Speaker, integration is also for protection. Those on the spectrum are beaten, hidden away, tied to trees, bedposts for the day, or killed because it is believed that they are demon-possessed. The UK is one of the few countries that are successfully implemented legislation to ensure that learners with neurodiverse conditions receive consistent therapy within schools. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, I wish to underscore the need for us to create legislation that enhances the lives of persons with autism, to promote autism awareness throughout April, and educate Kenyans on the signs, symptoms, and facts related to the condition. Some of my recommendations include that the Ministry of Education, in collaboration with the Ministry of Health, to provide for applied behavior therapy, also known as applied behavior analysis, as well as sensory integration therapy within school institutions, where learners with autism are enrolled. the Ministry of Education, in collaboration with the county governments through COG, to create frameworks that exclusively support learners with disabilities within the bursary allocations, so that learners with autism can also benefit as a form of affirmative action. That the Parliamentary Service Commission can also hold or support events about awareness to share their stories and have their voices heard. Mr. Speaker, you can also attend any of the several events planned throughout April to show your support as a leader in commemorating World Autism Awareness Month. Colleague senators can also speak out about autism throughout the month of April to help eliminate the stigma associated with it. The Senate Secretariat can also use the hashtag World Autism Awareness Month to help awareness on our Senate social media pages. And the Standing Committee on Education, through the Ministry of Education, can organize campaigns to raise awareness in schools and teachers' training facilities. A great way to get kids to embrace diversity by using the opportunity that World Autism Awareness Day offers to teach our children something more about the behaviors and actions that may arise with autistic children. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Statement pursuant to Standing Order 53-1, the Honorable Senator Cherange is dropped. The Senator for Kisumu, Senator Professor Tom Ojenda, that is also dropped. Both, I think he had two statements. Senator Hamida Kibwana.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have three statements, and my first statement will be on the welfare of street families and children. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 553-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Labour and Social Welfare on the state of welfare of street families and children. In the statement, the committee should state the number of street families and children living on the streets in the countries in Kenya, segregating this data in terms of gender. Number two, outline measures, if any, that the government has put in place to cater for the basic needs of such as shelter, food, healthcare, and the state of mental care to this special group of people. Number three, state measures, if any, to address the increasing number of street families and children, outlining programs in place of rehabilitate and reintegrate them into society. Number four, outline measures in place to protect street families and children from abuse and exploitation while living on the streets. Number five, state targeted interventions to prevent children from ending up on the streets in the first place. Stating steps taken to ensure that street children have access to education and other opportunities to improve their future prospects. And number six, cause an audit of prevailing policies on the welfare of street families and children, proposing legislative interventions, if any, to cater to the special group of Kenyans. I will continue with the next statement on claims of disposal of state-owned entities through privatization without the approval of Parliament. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Finance and Budget on claims of disposal of state-owned entities without the approval of Parliament. In the statement, the committee should clarify whether there are plans to dispose of state-owned Chemilil Sugar, South Nyanza Sugar, Nzoia Sugar, Miwani Sugar, Cabernet Hotel, Mount Elgon Lodge, Golf Hotel, Sunset Hotel Kisumu, Kenya Safari Lodges and Hotels, Consolidated Bank, Development Bank of Kenya, Agrochemical and Food Company, Kenya Wine Agencies, Kenya Meat Commission, and certain public universities through privatization without the approval of Parliament. Number 2, state the policy behind the move to privatize these entities, disclosing plans, if any, to undertake public participation among relevant stakeholders. Number 3, disclose the criteria used in choosing the entities, stating the valuation of each corporation and the expected proceeds from the proposed sale, and detail the procedures to be undertaken, stating the criteria for identifying potential buyers, as well as the terms and conditions of the sale. Mr. Speaker, I will continue with the last statement on Green Climate Fund's capacity building program for legislators in Kenya. Mr. Speaker, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53.1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Finance and Budget on the Green Climate Funds, that's GCF, Readiness Fund, for Kenya and how it could be used to support potential legislation and capacity building for senators. In the statement, the committee should disclose the status of Kenya's readiness program for accessing GCF funding, disclosing steps being taken to ensure that Kenya is fully prepared to access and utilize these funds. Number 2, table Kenya's implementation strategy of the fund, stating plans, if any, to involve the Senate in its implementation. Number 3, state the specific requirements and criteria for accessing this fund for the development of climate-related legislation. Number 4, disclose the total amount available for capacity building for senators for the period 1st January to 31st December 2023, stating specific areas the Readiness Fund covers, timelines, and procedures for accessing the fund, and state measures, if any, to ensure that the GCF Readiness Fund is aligned with Kenya's national climate change priorities, stating ways in which this fund can support the development of a robust and sustainable climate finance architecture. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Hamida. Seeing the Honorable Senator Wambua Enokio, you want to speak to one of the statements? All right, go ahead. Thank you.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker. I actually want to speak to two, but the one on the warfare of street children. Mr. Speaker, these children are Kenyan children. It is the responsibility, first of all, of the caregivers, whether parents or guardians, to take care of these children, because this is our future. In the event that then caregivers are unable to take care of these children, then that responsibility shifts to government institutions that really should take care of our children and make sure that we don't have this issue of street families and street children, give them dignity and hope in life. But Mr. Speaker, the statement that I want to spend a bit of time to speak to is a second statement on a decision by the executive to bypass Parliament in the process of privatizing parasitals. The Speaker, simply defined, sustainable development is the ability of the present generation to extract benefits from our resources today in a manner that does not jeopardize the ability of future generations to extract benefits from the same resources. The Speaker, there is a reason why, as it is today, and I stand guided by my brother, Senator Mugatana, that the interpretation of the Constitution is not a matter to be undertaken by everyone. But the Speaker, as it were, there is a reason why parliamentary approval is necessary before we dispose public assets. Because, Mr. Speaker, in times of recession, like we are going through one now, where the situation does not look very good, the financial standing of a lot of government institutions is not very healthy. There is always the temptation to go for quick fixes, to do things today, fix a problem today without much thought on what is going to happen tomorrow. The Speaker, I find it completely irresponsible, and I say this advisedly, Mr. Speaker, that we may want to dispose so many parastatals now to deal with a current crisis without much regard to the benefits that the public gets from those resources now and into the future. The Speaker, I want to go on record as the Senator of Kitui and as a leader in this country. We have some parastatals in our region that have been earmarked for privatization. The Speaker, I want to say that the committee to which that statement will be forwarded must have serious thoughts about the role of Parliament in the process of privatizing public institutions. So, Mr. Speaker, we don't just accept to privatize today and deal with a problem that we are facing today, and then tomorrow, when the same problem comes, then we have no fallback position. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, and this I say again advisedly, governments will come. We have had governments before this one. There will be other governments later. But we have only one country called Kenya. Whatever we do, our decisions must not just begin and end with the aspirations of the government of the day. We have a country to look into and take care of. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank Senator Amida for bringing those statements so that we can have an honest and robust conversation. And when the matter goes to the committees, I hope that senators will also find time to follow the statements there and make their contribution. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable Senator Mugatana Danson Buya.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to comment on Senator Asige's statement and also on the statement by Senator Hamida with regard to privatization. Mr. Speaker, I was reading the story of the wife of the founding father of Tanzania, the late Julius Nyerere, whom we hold with very high regard. Mr. Speaker, the story is told about his very wonderful mama, who is highly regarded in Tanzania and in East Africa as a whole. Amongst the 7 children that they raised together with the late president, 2 of them had mental conditions. Mr. Speaker, I'm mentioning this to join with my colleague, Senator Asige, to fight stigmatization of people who have issues, Mr. Speaker, with their mental status. Autism, Mr. Speaker, can happen to the best of us, to the best families, to presidents, to ministers of the gospel, to ministers in cabinet, to members of parliament, to senators. We could all have children who have autism because, Mr. Speaker, the causative factors are environmental, biological, and some of them are inherent. You cannot prevent. If it is going to happen, it happens. Mr. Speaker, you have a child you love very much, but they have this repetitive behavior, like my colleague Senator Asige has said. You have this child you love very much. You smile to them, they don't smile back. They don't maintain eye contact. Mr. Speaker, they are not able to answer to their name. Over a period of time, you get that assessment from the hospital and the doctors who tell you it's autism. Mr. Speaker, we have been given the statistics. We cannot live without this part of our society. It is a sign of development. It is a sign of civilization that we take care of our weakest in our society. That is, in fact, civilization. So, Mr. Speaker, I really want us to support that statement and the committee that is going to deal with it. I pray, Mr. Speaker, that it will give very severe attention to the proposals, like putting aside a certain amount of CDF funding for education towards sustaining children who have problems, disabilities such as autism, Mr. Speaker. Also, Mr. Speaker, the committee can look at a possibility of having this second day of April to be commemorated across the counties, because the counties, Mr. Speaker, including Tana River County, they don't mention some of these things. They don't talk about them. You don't even hear, even where we have schools that are supporting the disabled, like the Hola mentally handicapped, or in Tana River County.
The Honorable Mungatana.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
You may need to close your support to the statement.
Yes. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm saying that the committee should look at possibility, Mr. Speaker, of making it mandatory for counties to commemorate this day so that we create that awareness. Mr. Speaker, I also wanted to make this observation on the issue of privatization without involving the Parliament. Mr. Speaker, I speak with a lot of sadness. There was once in Tana River County the Hola Ginnery, which was owned by the National Irrigation Board, now National Irrigation Authority. Mr. Speaker, it was disposed of. Now when you go to that site, Mr. Speaker, it's a shell of the past. Nobody is employed there. Nothing is going on. And it was sold off to people who then are just prospecting on the land which the machinery used to stand. Mr. Speaker, it should not happen again. The same story can be told of Kilifi Cashew Nuts factory. It was also government-owned, Mr. Speaker, together with the people there. Mr. Speaker, it is a shell of its past. Disposing these assets without involving the voice of the people, the parliament, should be a no, 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 Mr. Speaker. The people's representatives must be involved. We must not surrender our power of oversight. We must know that those people who are interested in buying, why can't they buy shares and keep those assets moving? Because normally, Mr. Speaker, when the people purchase these shares, these items in privatization, the conditions are such that they just dispose machinery at throwaway prices. People lose jobs. Economies around those particular regions collapse. And at the end of it, those people who purchase those things, they end up just being speculators of the land on which those machineries stood for. And Mr. Speaker, those machineries were bought by public funds. So, Mr. Speaker, I think that decision must be really examined again, if it is there. And I'm urging the committee that will look into the question of privatization, that they must protect the interests of the people. They must, Mr. Speaker, also speak to the fact that those the enterprises are seeking to be privatized were running, they were giving jobs to people, they were running local economies. If at all we must go in that direction, then those jobs, those local communities, those lifestyles that were created around those enterprises, we must find a way of sustaining them without destroying what the people invested in. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Mugatana. Honorable members, when you're commenting, kindly limit your comments to maximum 2 minutes. Senator Orwoba, you had checked in as William Cheptumo, but I will allow you to comment and to limit your comments to 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Technology and faults. I don't know why my card is reading Cheptumo, but thank you for the opportunity. I would like to give a few remarks in support of Senator Hamida's statement on labor, on the state of welfare and the street families of children. Mr. Speaker, I want to start by saying that all of us, including those of us who are here in the Senate, we are literally all one sickness away from being in the streets, Mr. Speaker. The culture that we have in Kenya nowadays is that because healthcare and the affordability of the same has become too high, is that even just one sickness can actually put a whole family out on the streets. We are having harambes to ensure that people can access medical care. We are having all sorts of desperate situations just to save one life of a family. And so when I read Senator Hamida's statement on the street families and the street children, this is a very real situation, and it can happen to any one of us sitting, even in the Senate. You can actually, I can see Senator Eddie in the House. I want to say that it is as real as having Senator Eddie going out to the streets because of one sickness, Mr. Speaker. When this statement was actually presented to the floor of the House, being in the Labour Committee, I thought to myself, while we're looking at it on a social welfare kind of mitigation, Mr. Speaker, some issues have to be addressed, particularly the issue of job creation, Mr. Speaker. We are actually living in the times where we have to be intentional on creating jobs. And where do jobs come from, Mr. Speaker? They come from entrepreneurship. So it's all intertwined, Mr. Speaker. As much as this will be pushed to the Labour Committee, I find myself thinking, shouldn't the Education Committee also be part of it? Because our education should also be geared to a way that we are actually educating our children to be able to be entrepreneurs, to be able to stop looking for employment and start setting up businesses. So that while we are addressing the current situation of the street children and the street families by offering some form of social welfare, we are also mitigating that in the future, 10, 15 years, we are actually not going to have any Kenyan on the streets because they have a source of income, either through employment or through entrepreneurship, Mr. Speaker. I was actually thinking to myself, we talk about affordable housing. Affordable housing, which, as you know, Mr. Speaker, the Kenya Kwanza government is trying to implement, is one of the issues that needs to be really, really prioritized, Mr. Speaker. The street families are not out in the streets because they are not earning. Some of them actually earn. Some of them actually have jobs. But the problem is they cannot afford to even pay rent or have their homes wherever it is that they want to settle. So, Mr. Speaker, as I rise to support Senator Hamida's statement, I also want to say, Mr. Speaker, that please do not think of this as a narrow thing just to send to the Labour Committee. This is something that requires, it's a multifaceted issue. So even in terms of our education, how are we pushing for entrepreneurship? Mr. Speaker, I beg to support this statement. Thank you.
Senator Okech Eddie Gisheru.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll try and be as succinct as possible. First of all, I just want to make a few comments about, and actually in support of Senator Hamida's statement on street children. You know, the issue of street children in this country, Mr. Speaker, is one that perturbs me because it just shows inhumane nature of our government. Because these are children that, if you look at the average population that we have in our streets today, do not go beyond 15 to 20,000 people. Then you have these 15 to 20,000 people in our streets who are kids born, rightfully so, with the enshrined right in the Constitution of belonging to this country, and then they look like they're stateless. If there is one thing that the government can do that is innovative around dealing with the issue of street children, is to first of all give them a chance to be able to be registered. I think that registering these kids and even actually giving them IDs gives them a sense of belonging to a country that then every other thing can follow. So I think that with that issue of street children, what I would wish to see, even as this committee considers this statement, is how do we give these children a sense of belonging that they can also be Kenyans? Because when they are registered, they start enjoying being Kenyans with regard to any other aspect of their rights that is enshrined in the Constitution. That said, because of pressure of time, Mr. Speaker, I also wanted to make a comment or two about the issue of privatization. Mr. Speaker, you know, privatization of state entities is actually an issue of the will of the people of Kenya. It is not the will of the executive or the will of one arm of government. This is the highest level where sovereignty is extremely tested. And Mr. Speaker, if you look at Article 94 of the Constitution, this particular role is given particularly to Parliament. And the reason why this is important, that article in sub-article 2, Parliament manifests the diversity of the nation, represents the will of the people, and exercises that sovereignty. When you are going to talk about state institutions and state entities that have been placed as investments in different counties, like what I saw my brother Senator Boni Alwale talking about Zoya Sugar. You know, these are places whereby Kenyans invested both emotionally and economically to the extent
Senator Eddie, 1 minute as you close. Give him 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, some of these statements I think are very, very important to dissect. Like, this is a role that actually, I think this is one of the statements that probably should even come as a motion so that we can be able to explore it further. But I just wanted to say that as a House, let's try as much as possible that we do not give some unalienable rights to ourselves to be able to represent the people, because all legislative powers that are affecting the people with regards to these things like privatization are actually held in this House. And I think that on this issue of privatization, because of pressure of time, I wanted to urge Senator Hamida, even as she considers pushing this as a statement to the relevant committee, that is Finance and Budget, which I also sit in, please consider bringing it as a motion so that you can actually be able to vent about it properly and be able to cement the role of Parliament with regards to this issue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable Senator Maruma Jones Mashushe, do you have a comment to the statements, or you want to read yours? Because I'm seeing in the order paper your statement is equally listed for today.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to comment about a statement by Senator Hamida Kibwana, and later on maybe read my statement.
Very well. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to comment on Senator Hamida Kibwana's statement on privatization of state corporations. Mr. Speaker, this statement has come at the right time, because then it will allow us to get to understand the justification and the rationale of privatizing the state corporations, and especially doing so without involving Parliament. Mr. Speaker, when the executive is operating or is working, the architecture of our Constitution requires that Parliament does oversight. So what we'll be wanting to get from the Committee of Finance and Budget is the criterion that was used to identify the state corporations that are going to be privatized. Our experience, Mr. Speaker, has not been so good in Kenya. We have a situation where the management of state corporations under some unscrupulous government entities connive to milk state corporations dry, and then they sell them away for a song. They sell them away very cheaply. We do not know if this is the ploy, but Mr. Speaker, this statement will bring to the fore why the government of the day has decided to privatize these corporations without involving Parliament, which is an oversight arm of government. We have in my county 2 hotels, that is Voice Safari Lodge and Gulia, which are going to be privatized, and I don't know the criterion that was used. I don't even know how much is going to be raised by privatizing. I am supposed to be given opportunity to understand why they are being privatized, and also, Mr. Speaker, to get to give my comment. What happened to public participation when you are doing or when you are governing? So, Mr. Speaker, I would be waiting for responses from the Committee of Finance and Budget, and I know it will go a long way into maybe getting involved and deciding whether or not to allow or to see how we can prevent such from happening.
You now may go ahead to read your statement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senator Cherargei, protect me from Senator Cherargei. Thank you for allowing me to read this statement on delayed disbursement of Higher Education Loans Board funding. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Education regarding delayed disbursement of Higher Education Loans Board funding to university and technical and vocational education training, TVET students. In the statement, the committee should, 1, explain the reasons for the delay in disbursement by the Higher Education Loans Board, HELB, of loans to students in tertiary institutions, outlining the measures the government has put in place to cushion students who solely depend on HELB funding to stay in class. Number 2, state reasons that led to students undertaking diploma and certificate courses in the universities being considered ineligible for HELB funding. And 3, provide a comprehensive report of the annual budget as disbursed by HELB, indicating amounts allocated to undergraduate TVET, and Afya Elimu, clearly stating amounts contributed by other partners of the HELB. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Maruma. Honorable members, I have got requests from the Honorable Senator Samson Cherargei, as well as Senator Kamar, and you both have got statements pending. I do not know whether you want to comment on the statement by Senator Maruma or to your statement that is scheduled for this afternoon as well. Senator Cherargei, yours had been dropped by the Speaker because it was called out in your absence. I will, if it is commenting, then I'll ask you to comment and limit you to a maximum of 2 minutes so that we can transact other businesses of the House. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, and the great people of Bomet County must be proud of what you are doing in the House, considering that this is your first term. And we are proud of you, Mr. Speaker, sir. One quick thing, Mr. Speaker, when I hear this issue of help, you know, I get mad, but I'm not running mad. Because the chunk of the money that is sent by Higher Education's Loan Board to private universities is killing public universities. Mr. Speaker, sir, and I think we must have a conversation. It is good we have former Minister of Higher Education, Professor Margaret Kamar. We are using public money to fund private universities. I agree those students are our children, and they are public children if you want to call them. But what is stifling Higher Education's Loan Board is not even about delay of disbursement, but where majority, 3/4 of allocation through Higher Education's Loan Board go to private universities. And that is why Moi University is collapsing. That's why Egerton is collapsing. That's why virtually all public universities are collapsing, Mr. Speaker, sir. And even if I don't know the university that my brother, Senator Eddie Okech, went to, is also collapsing because it's a public university, Mr. Speaker. So we must have a conversation, Mr. Speaker, on how, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Cherargei, do you want to?
Yeah, just have a second because my time is running. Okay.
Mr. Speaker, it's important that my brother, Senator Cherargei, knows that I went to Yale University in Connecticut in the US and is doing very well, it's not collapsing.
You know, Mr. Speaker, maybe the Higher Education's Loan Board and Ministry of Education should fact check the universities when, you know, he's one of his principals in Azimio got a fake degree. Mr. Speaker, what I was just saying in simple is that we must agree as a nation that let us stop and agree that we believe in public institutions. Mr. Speaker, sir, in conclusion, in 30 seconds, the comrades must receive their disbursement. Just 1 minute, Mr. Speaker, 30 seconds only. Mr. Speaker, just 30 seconds. Mr. Speaker, the comrades are suffering. And you know when the comrades open university, they eat the chicken. After some time, they eat the egg. After some time, they start eating what the chicken is eating. And the comrades are suffering, Mr. Speaker. Please, let this disbursement be done as soon as possible. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Cherargei, you did not mean your words in your comments, and thank you for that. Senator Professor Kamar Margaret.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can take the 2 minutes to contribute and then read my statement. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the statement by Senator Maruma on the Help Loans Board. And I only want to put one thing, sustainability of help. Mr. Speaker, once upon a time, as has been said by Senator Cherargei, I was the Minister for Higher Education, Science and Technology, and our interest at the time, which was the year 2012, was the sustainability of the help, the loans board. And in fact, we hired a banker by the name Ringera for that one reason, that we wanted somebody who would look at things differently, behave like a bank, and actually loan consistently. Because if we are saying the delay is because of government, it means there's no sustainability within the loans board itself. I think as the Committee of Education looks at this question, they should actually grill the help executive and help committee on that one fact. When is it going to be sustainable? They must show us how they are going to make it sustainable in the long run. Because if we don't make it sustainable, we will be hitting at government instead of actually ensuring that the loans board recovers money in time to be able to take care of the loans. Mr. Speaker, I will only leave it at that, but more, our students, when they're suffering in university, become agitated, they disrupt everybody, they disrupt themselves, their academic program is highly disrupted. So we know that really an angry child, an hungry child is angry always. So let's help our children so that they can get support. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, may I now then read my own statement? Again, to the Committee of Education, Mr. Speaker, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Education regarding the failure by the Ministry of Education to release the capitation funds to special schools since January 2023. In the statement, the committee should, 1, outline the reasons for the failure by the ministry to ensure transfer of capitation to special schools, leading to a financial crisis that could cripple learning in these schools across the country. 2, state the plans the ministry has put in place, if any, to ensure that the non-teaching staff at the said schools who have not received any salary for over 8 months are duly paid. 3, state when the top-up payments for pupils living with disabilities were last sent to schools, outlining the amount paid per child. And 4, finally, explain whether the transferred funds are sufficient to cover all that the school needs to cater for the learners with special needs. Mr. Speaker, only 2 weeks ago we had our public participation on the bill on learners with disability, and we listened to the chairman of the Heads Association of Special Schools give us the horror stories under which they're undertaking they're handling their students. The special students are already special, and we are dealing with students who don't have enough food. And we recently heard of a school where they only have 1 meal per day. It is a very...
Senator Kamar, you just need to read your statement.
Thank
Do
you.
not go into debating on it.
Thank you. I put it to rest. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Crystal Asige, you want to comment to the statement by Professor Kamar?
Please.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much.
2 minutes. We're limiting our comments to 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support the statement made by Senator Kamar on issues of capitations being released to special schools in the country. Mr. Speaker, the majority of learners with disabilities in primary schools are underfunded. This is owing to the same figures that are budgeted for every single year, despite the increase of PWD enrollment to these schools. The government provides an annual capitation grant at the rate of 1,420 per child in primary school and a top-up of 2,300 for learners with disabilities. Special secondary schools receive a capitation of 22,244 and a top-up of 35,000 for all learners with disabilities. This flat rate model assumes that there are uniform costs across all learners with disabilities, which is a dangerous assumption, Mr. Speaker. This cost should also take into account that children with disabilities are not monolithic. Each child and each disability needs its own specialized care and therefore capitation and budgeting. My proposed way forward, Mr. Speaker, that there is a need to move away from a flat rate capitation. Funding procedures should expressly provide for differentiated unit costs that takes into account various disability categories. implementing as well of the 2018 presidential directive, allocating 20% of Ministry of Education infrastructure funds to schools to be applied to special schools. That's from 2018, Mr. Speaker. And secondary schools that are special should avail funds as they are for any other special schools in the country, Mr. Speaker. It's a real problem, and kids with disabilities are very much suffering, Mr. Speaker, because you cannot have every single year the budgeting remain the same, but our kids who are in special schools or need special attention in education who are increasing every single year. Mr. Speaker, I support the statement by Senator Kamar, and I will also be looking forward to hearing the responses from the Ministry of Education. I thank you.
Senator Maruma Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity again to comment about this very important statement by Senator Professor Kamar about funding of education, special needs education. It is really discouraging to hear that the financing or the capitation that is supposed to go to financing education in special needs schools is not forthcoming. We've been given from the statement that even the employees who are supposed to support the students who are living in disabilities in the schools is not forthcoming. The employees have a backlog or have arrears of salaries running to months, up to 8 months, unpaid. If we don't fund the schools, special needs schools, already the learners there are marginalized. They are disadvantaged. So if we don't fund properly, then that serves to marginalize further the students. So what I would be wanting to know from the response of the stakeholders who would be invited is the reasons why we want to continue marginalizing and disadvantaging a group of people who are already disadvantaged, Mr. Speaker. Apart from that, Mr. Speaker, we have our schools in Kenya, which are dealing with disadvantaged students. They have shortage of teachers. They have shortage of teachers. Already they require at least one student a teacher for some disabilities. But if you have schools like Timbila Primary School in Taveta, of Taveta County, having a shortage of 8 teachers, what are we saying about our focus and our how we need to support the special needs education? So I support the statement, Mr. Speaker, and I will be waiting to get the responses. I thank you.
Senator Dr. Halwale Boni.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is a very important matter. Here we are in the Constitution. We are telling people living with disabilities that we are waiting for you here in the Senate and in the National Assembly and in the Cabinet to play affirmative action so that you be seen to participate. Are you waiting that they come here when they are totally illiterate? And if you are expecting that they come here and participate at the standard that would be expected of them, who do you expect to bring them to this level? I speak with a lot of emotion about this because this is an area where I committed my efforts when I was controlling constituency development funds in Ekolomani, and I built Pusiro Primary School, a Regi school for the mixed school, and Muhomo Primary School. It's a pity that this is coming up, and I want to thank Professor that it's only 2 days ago when I was doing breakfast with the head teacher and the deputy who is impaired, cannot talk, cannot hear, but can see. We're doing breakfast, and they were coming to request me to take to them 2 bags of beans and 3 bags of maize because the children had no food. Have we sunk to a level whereby senators should be releasing their meager salary to buy food for children who are disabled. Mr. Speaker, the statement must be strong enough and a proper, proactive answer to be brought before us, because we cannot treat children who are living with disabilities as if they have committed a crime for not having been born with all the 5 senses. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator. Honorable members, that brings us to the time assigned for statements. We earlier on had dealt with statements from the various chairpersons of the committees, and now we're going to call the next order.
Order number 8, the Coffee Bill, Senate Bills number 10 of 2023, first reading. A bill for an act of parliament to provide for the establishment of the Coffee Board of Kenya and the Coffee Research Institute, to provide for the role of the national and the county governments, provide for the regulation, development, and promotion of coffee industry, and for connected purposes.
Next order.
Order number 9, the Natural Resources Benefit Sharing Bill, Senate Bills number 6 of 2022, second reading, division.
Honorable members, this one will be deferred because of the numbers. Let's go to the next order.
Order number 10, the County Vocational Education and Training Bill, Senate Bills number 3 of 2022, second reading, division.
Similarly, honorable members, this also will be deferred. Next order.
Order number 11, the Preservation of Human Dignity and Enforcement of Economic and Social Rights Bill, Senate Bills number 7 of 2022, second reading.
Honorable members, we are resuming debate on this. And I'm just getting a confirmation. We had on the floor of the House when the debate was adjourned, the House was adjourned on 30th of March. Senator Veronica Minda, you have got a balance of 4 minutes, and I now invite you to conclude making your contributions to the motion. You may go ahead, Senator Veronica.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This debate was adjourned at a point when I was coming close to the conclusion of discussing the points that I wanted to raise regarding the bill that was brought to the floor of this House by Senator Mungatana from Tana River County. And Mr. Speaker, I was on this point where I was explaining that there was need to effect certain amendments in order to enable this bill meet the purpose of the drafting of this legislation, Mr. Speaker, and in order to meet the purposes of Article 43 of the Constitution of Kenya 2010. Mr. Speaker, there is also need for a national conversation on the concept of progressive realization of economic and social rights as provided for under the Constitution. It is therefore important that this bill presents a review of, this conversation presents a review of measures that will be undertaken by both the national and county governments at different levels to assess the impact and to analyze what they have worked on and come up with a review of what has worked and what has not worked. So a framework must be established after this conversation within this bill to enable a measuring scale to show what would be deemed as having worked at the county government level and at the national government level, and the assessment of the measures taken by both levels of government in order for this right under Article 43 to be fully enjoyed by the citizens of Kenya. And there is also need in that national conversation to review the judicial decisions and the practice in comparative jurisdictions as to the criteria of or index that should be applied in measuring and tracking the realization of economic and social rights. And then, Mr. Speaker, the oversight mandate of Parliament regarding monitoring and implementation of economic, social, and cultural rights should be more clearly provided for in this bill. And that means we need to have included in the bill development of indices that even Parliament itself as an institution can use, first to monitor the implementation of the economic and social rights by the two governments, and secondly, to oversight other institutions that are working at a national level in giving these rights or monitoring these rights. These are institutions like Kenyan, and GEC. What indices do they use to now gauge whether these rights have been realized fully or have been partly realized? And if it's partly realized, how far have they been realized and what remains to be done? So, Mr. Speaker, sir, during our committee meeting, it was then agreed that it would be ideal to seek that this bill be amended to include all those issues that we had discussed earlier, and to hold also an extensive stakeholders engagement to make sure that every single view that needs to be included within this bill, since the first time it's being legislated upon, is then captured within the bill to give it the full effect. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, as I rise to support, we also ask that the amendments be effected, and we hope the mover of the motion, our senior senator, Senator Mungatana, will consider the input that we have done as JLAC and find it necessary to include it within the bill, and then...
Senator, your time is up. The Honorable Senator Cherargei Samson Kiprotich.
Human rights and preservation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. From the onset, Senator Mungatana Danson Mlamwamba continues to distinguish himself. He is churning very serious bills, Mr. Speaker. And I must commend him, Mr. Speaker. And you know, he's also senior because he has served in this house, especially the lower house. I think this is the first time that he's serving in the upper house. And it looks that he has been doing his homework very well. It is not a case where the dog ate the homework, Mr. Speaker, sir, as in some cases. Mr. Speaker, sir, from the onset, I want to support this bill, the preservation of human dignity and enforcement of economic and social rights, as per Article 43, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, the assent of 1948 on United Nations Declaration on Human Rights of 1948 expanded and gave right to human rights. Mr. Speaker, you have to note, as a legal practitioner, that rights continue to expand. We used to have basic rights, like right to food, to shelter, and those were basic rights. Now we have advanced even issue of gender rights, where we are discussing a third gender rule. So, Speaker, we are discussing about environmental rights, where in the past, Mr. Speaker, it was not a norm. We are discussing about the first onset was on the issue of civil and political rights, Mr. Speaker. And Kenya, being one of the signatories of these charters of human rights, the famous Banjul on human rights, Banjul on human rights of Gambia Declaration, where the Constitution says where a country is a signatory to the charter, Mr. Speaker, it forms part of our laws, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, when you read under Article 43, it is very important that it has been highlighted, especially on the issue of health, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as we talk today, doctors in my county are on strike or on go slow. Yet Article 43 provides, and this law wants to give power to Kenya national human rights that the governor and the CCL should be surcharged. Because if they are not providing health, and it is a basic human rights, it is abusing, it is ultra-vires, it is contrary to Article 43. Because if doctors have not been paid, if they are not in hospital, if they are not serving the people, what is happening in Nandi is very unfortunate. Because if somebody walks in with malaria, Mr. Speaker, they are not treated. It is an abuse of Article 43. And therefore, government has an obligation, be it at the county or national level, to implement the human right, Mr. Speaker, sir. And Mr. Speaker, when you look at about the right of the human rights, limitations and fundamental of human rights, Mr. Speaker, these rights we enjoy because Article 43 is very specific, that attainable health care standard, Mr. Speaker, which includes the right to health care services. We have seen even in private hospitals, and I'm told, I don't know, the women rep of Kirinyaga is bringing a bill at the National Assembly where they're supposed to find people who deny medical emergency services, Mr. Speaker, and there are many accidents happening in the country. Some of these private hospitals demand certain deposit before being able to attend to a patient, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, these are conversations that we must continue, that both state and non-state actors, Mr. Speaker, must be obligated. It is not cherry picking, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, Article 43, to have breath and life, it must be looked at properly. And even reproductive health care, Mr. Speaker. There is a conversation, I don't know which state was it, in the US, where the judge have suspended the use of the contraception by women of what do you call, kuafia mimba. The English word is running away, abortion bill. And it is a huge conversation where even reproductive health, women are saying, give us our right to decide what we want to do with our bodies. I don't know why people there like aborting, because Senator Kalwale is the father of many nations. We should be doing what the Lord gave us to do. Mr. Speaker, it's not Father Abraham, and many people are Father Abraham, Mr. Speaker. But the problem here is deadbeat. There is what you call deadbeat dads and daddies across the country. Mr. Speaker, point of order, I don't know why the Senator Mutinda is coming in between me and you, and that is violating standing orders, Mr. Speaker. Thank God you didn't see, you didn't capture
Senator Mutinda. You crossed over from this side. Take note of that. Go back. Properly respect the House and allow Senator Cherargei to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So what I'm just saying, Mr. Speaker, is that on the issue of reproductive health care, it is an emotive issue. The religious sector, most of us are Christians and Muslims, do not want to have this conversation about reproductive health care, whether we should train in school. I have seen a member of parliament of Homa Bay Town, Mheshimiwa Kaluma, is bringing a bill to even ban training of issues of biology and reproductive health care. I've seen an abridged version on issue of LGBTQ, Mr. Speaker. So the question is, when you talk about reproductive health care, should we include men who marry men or women who marry men as part of reproductive health care? You remember Museveni has said, President Museveni has said, I will close the two gentlemen who have married a man to a man, and I've never understood what a man would be looking for in a man, that if the day they will be able to give birth, then he can be able to allow LGBTQ. I know, and I want to thank the president, but because he was in Germany, he said we respect the cultures and values of other society. They should respect us. Mr. Speaker, they should be telling this country, Mr. Speaker, why is it a criminal or a sin for Africans to be polygamous? But it is not a sin for them, it is not a sin for them to practice LGBTQ. That is a conversation we must have. Because when you discuss about reproductive health care, Where are we? You know, that's the biggest challenge, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and therefore Article 24 talks about limitation of rights, Mr. Speaker. It doesn't mean when you have a right, you abuse. Where your right ends, another person's rights begin. And I know Senator Muma, who is a member of Speaker's panel, 2 weeks ago, they were on the streets. Yes, they have a right under Article 37. But they don't have a right to destroy property and maim and killings, Mr. Speaker. So, you know, where the right ends, another right begins, because that is limitations of right. That is what we are just saying, Mr. Speaker. Issue of housing, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank the President. The President is on the top agenda of affordable housing, Mr. Speaker. Every Kenyan should and must. And we will start with Migori, Mr. Speaker, so that we can see how government works, Mr. Speaker. I know Senator Eddie Okech. You know, Mr. Speaker, our brothers, like my brother, Senator Eddie Okech, is a very good friend of mine, a fine gentleman, an academic by excellence. But you know, when they hear development, they become allergic to it. So we want, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that we do affordable housing. It is part, you know, by the way, let me at least, so that we are having a conversation are equals in this house. When you look at under Article 43.3, the state shall provide appropriate social security to persons who are unable to support themselves and their dependents. So the state in itself has an obligation, and that is why the President is pushing affordable housing. And we have told the President it will not happen only in Nairobi, it will not happen in Kisumu, Eldoret, or Mombasa, or major towns. It must happen at the lowest possible areas. Even in the Kolomani constituency, we must have affordable housing down there, Mr. Speaker, sir. So therefore, when you talk about free from hunger, Mr. Speaker, and it is sad that more than 4 million Kenyans are facing starvation and hunger. And we want to thank the donors, the office of the Deputy President. They have been doing a lot to provide food and animal feeds also too. This is an obligation, and therefore, Mr. Speaker, sir, I know there is a bipartisan committee that has been formed. I don't know whether Senator Eddie Okech is there, but maybe he will brief me under a cup of tea. Personally, I'm not there. So, Mr. Speaker, and you are there, and we are proud of you. We'll do a good job. Mr. Speaker, the issue of subsidy, the government has an obligation. The government takes an obligation, Mr. Speaker, because the Article 43, the government must work on it towards it free from hunger. We don't want any Kenyan to die because of hunger in this country. Therefore, the President said we must subsidize production over consumption. We don't want to have hunger subsidy where it was like happy hour, Mr. Speaker, you know, for people who drink water like me and Uji, have different types. But there are Kenyans who drink other things after 7 or 7:30 thereabout, Mr. Speaker. There is what we call happy hour. What was happening with hunger subsidy, you hear it is in this supermarket, you go, they close the line, they finish. What the President is saying, let us irrigate more than 1 million acres in Kalana, Kulanu. Let us give subsidy to farmers in Bomet, in Kisiaya, in Kakamega, and I'm happy. And I'm happy even in Busia, in where, Mr. Speaker, so that fertilizer, and by the way, affordable seeds, quality seeds, farmers we are planting. You saw our President, Mr. Speaker, over the Easter himself, he was leading the nation planting. Mr. Speaker, I was planting in my small way, but you know, my shamba is a bit little low, I could not take a picture. But Mr. Speaker, the President has shown the nation that you can lead, you can do something from wherever you are. Mr. Speaker, and that is why we are challenging Kenya National Trading Corporation, KNTC, in future to purchase subsidized fertilizer in November, so that by November, December, January, farmers should have subsidized fertilizer. Mr. Speaker, I want to tell KNTC, if they bring subsidized fertilizer after 14th of April this year, in the next 1 week, as we have closed planting season, and also to request they diversify subsidized fertilizer to include coffee, to include tea, because majority of your people plant tea, to include sugarcane, to include even beans from Ukambani, and my brother Ngusia is there. So, Mr. Speaker, we must agree that on the issue of hunger, we approach it through 3D. We don't just look at the normal angle. And therefore, I really want to thank the president because he is working towards regionalization to free Kenyans from hunger. And therefore, when this bill comes, it will have a role to play through what Senator Mungatana is playing, because Kenya National Human Rights is given opportunity. And therefore, I want to tell my brothers from the other side, respectfully, you don't need to carry sufuria on your heads or the cooking pot. What we need to do is agree, go back to the farm, do proper farming, get enough food, take down sufuria, go and cook that food for the benefit of all Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, that's the only way we will change. Even if we do bipartisan approach and discuss about the cost of living and hunger subsidy and water, it is not sustainable. And any person who stepped in economic class knows that subsidies are never sustainable. You saw fuel subsidy, 34 billion could not be accounted. In fact, we had to censor the Minister of Energy in the previous handshake government, where the political godfather of my brother, Senator Eddie Okech, was a big brother in that engagement, Mr. Speaker. We had 34 billion cannot be accounted for. The hunger subsidy. So I want to ask my brothers on the issue of cost of living and food. We must allow farmers in Migori to go back to farming, in Nandi to go back in farming, in Kakamega, in Bomet, in Mandera. We can do irrigation in Kulana, Kulalu. I'm told even Sai, Mr. Speaker, as we talk today, floods is wreaking havoc in the northern part of Kenya. Why don't we use water pans, harvesting dams, Mr. Speaker, so that when it is dry season, our animals and we can do irrigation in northern Kenya, Mr. Speaker, then we can get enough and sufficient food. Mr. Speaker, Bingwa Mutharika in Malawi ensured that from food insecurity, through what the president is doing, through provision of subsidy in production, that country became food secure. And by the way, Mr. Speaker, if the country cannot provide food for its people, it is a threat to national security. And therefore, I want to thank the president and to say we need to actualize this, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, because I want only to finish with the issue of water. Mr. Speaker, the president and the government has committed they will build 100 dams. For example, in my county, Nandi, we are building Keben Dam, which is around 10 billion Kenya shillings. The border of Nandi and Kisumu, there is Soin Koro Dam. That is around 30 billion. We are building there between Kericho, Nandi, and Kisumu. We are also building Cape Karen Dam, that is 1.2 billion. Two rivers in Wasingishu, Carmeno Dam, Twake. You saw the president on Thursday, Mr. Speaker, at Mwache, commissioning and ensuring completion of Mwache, Mr. Speaker. There is Musima Springs in Coast that is not sufficient for those people, Mr. Speaker. Across the country, in Kakamega, 100 dams plus will be built. Even in Nyanza, in Siaya, in Omabe, even in Kisumu, Mr. Speaker. Because the president has realized that under Article 43, he has an obligation to ensure clean and safe water, Mr. Speaker. Because most of the diseases is because I don't know whether Mukumu issue, where Senator Bondi Khalwala and our condolences, our deepest condolences and our empathies with parents and stakeholders of Mukumu girls, and I think the other school that because I think we have lost a number of students. I don't know whether it is because of unclean water, but maybe as investigations ongoing, we'll be able to know, Mr. Speaker. But provision of access and clean water is very critical. Most diseases are related with water, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, the government must go a step forward and build 100 dams and ensure they are there, Mr. Speaker. We want to provide water in this city. There is this issue of Muranga providing water, the tunnel. We have the water that is there is no longer the Kindaruma dams that is sufficient to this city, Mr. Speaker. There is no water. Most of the people in this city are drilling boreholes in this water, Mr. Speaker, to get water, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, even when demonstrations were there, getting water is a problem. We wanted to make it, and I saw, by the way, was it pipeline, where Honorary Wananchi was removing water, washing our brothers and sisters that had given pink or was it purple water. So, Mr. Speaker, water is life. Water is important, and I think the president has realized that it is. Finally, on education, we were just discussing the issue of education, Mr. Speaker, and when I said many people are laughing on social media, us who are comrades, I don't know whether Senator Eddie went, is it called somewhere in the U.S., I think the Ministry of Education should get us the accreditation properly so that some of us can pronounce whether comrades were there. Because at the beginning of the semester, Mr. Speaker, comrades eat chicken. After 2-3 weeks, when the health boom is easing off, comrades start eating the egg. After some time, Mr. Speaker, we eat what the chicken eats, and that is sukuma wiki, the kales, and many others. So, Mr. Speaker, it is also important that education should be affordable. And I had a very strong argument that why would we use public money to fund private universities? And that is why you find today everybody is writing to private universities. And I'm happy for the first time. Most of the young people, and I'm proud, are now shunning universities, Mr. Speaker, to go to TVETs, technical vocational training centers. Because, Mr. Speaker, all of us cannot go to university. And I'm happy the turnover, Mr. Speaker, the children who are going to technical institutions, Mr. Speaker, are doing so for the benefit, for their lives, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, I know it will be unpopular. We cannot, and I want to ask CS Machoku to restructure when they are giving capitation of higher education's loan board. They should not give priority to private universities. And I think the former Minister of Education must have done an holy alliance with these private universities. Because our universities, public universities, are dying. When you go there are no toilets, the buildings are pathetic, lecturers are not being paid, lecturers are living in squalor, Mr. Speaker. You find at the end of the day, lecturers are running to private universities like Strathmore University, like many universities that we know, Kabarak, and many others, Mr. Speaker. Why don't we go and fund, using higher education loan board funds, to fund public universities, to make them competitive? Most of our universities have shut down research. They are not getting funding to do research. How can we expect our graduates to be competitive? I don't know, Senator Eddy was mentioned on the issue of server. How can we make sure our children are able, Mr. Speaker, to know what server is when we say open the server? We want to see the arithmetic. I know he's an IT person. Mr. Speaker, how? So if education must be affordable and quality, that is my argument. The education must be affordable and quality. The issue of junior secondary schools, Mr. Speaker, there was allegation that one teacher was teaching the entire subjects. How can we ensure affordable and quality education if we are not, Mr. Speaker? And therefore, Mr. Speaker, in 1 minute, is that this bill will ensure for us who are champions of human rights, it will do exactly what is the best for us.
Senator Cherargei, your time is up. Honorable Senator Muma Muyeka Catherine.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. First, I'd like to congratulate Senator Mungatana on this very important bill. Mr. Speaker, this may very well be one of the most important bills that this country needs to have. Mr. Speaker, we have a constitution that recognizes the entire range of human rights, including socioeconomic rights. Those of you who know what socioeconomic rights are, these are rights that are not just achieved at a go, they are rights that are progressively realized. Mr. Speaker, Article 21 of the Constitution actually calls upon the states to put in place legislative measures to ensure that standards for achieving progressive realization of the rights in Article 43 are put in place. This bill is an attempt to help us to achieve that. Mr. Speaker, the rights under Article 43 include the right to health, including reproductive health rights, the right to water and sanitation, freedom from hunger, the right to education, the right to housing, and the right to emergency treatment, among other rights. Mr. Speaker, Kenya is also signatory to international treaties, particularly the UN Convention on Rights, on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. And Article 2 of the Constitution makes that convention part of the laws of Kenya. We are also signatory to the African Charter that has also provided these socio-economic rights. The way to implement these rights is through the sectoral ministries and by counties. So the right to health, for instance, is implemented consultatively or cooperatively by the Ministry of Health and the county governments. So is the right to water, education, and so on. Mr. Speaker, therefore, the number one space where these rights are implemented are the sectoral policies and the sectoral laws on water, on health, and all those rights that are provided. Article 21, that is the article that this bill seeks to implement, is an article that seeks to help us to enforce the implementation of these rights. And this bill intended to do this. Mr. Speaker, our Constitution contemplated that we would have oversight, independent institutions, and these include the Article 59 commissions, including the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, the National Gender and Equality Commission, and if you look at the laws that established these commissions, Section 8 of the National Gender and Equality Commission actually gives the mandate to set the standards for implementing Article 43 rights to the National Gender and Equality Commission. This bill proposes to give that mandate to the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. So if passed as is, the bill would have consequential implications on both the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights Act and the National Gender and Equality Act. So and I happen to be a member of the JLAC, one of the recommendations we were making is that we need to look at this bill as we amend. We need to ensure that we are reading other laws that will be impacted by this bill to ensure there is harmony and not confusion. That's one of the recommendations we made. We also made a recommendation that the best way to ensure that a sector implements its responsibilities under Article 21, under Article 43, is to ensure that the policies of that sector, the laws of that sector, actually entrench that responsibility. So the responsibility, for instance, to ensure progressive realization of the right to health are best entrenched in the Public Health Act, in the health policy at the national level, and in the county sectoral laws and policies, if any. So that those who are implementing, and implementers in the executive usually have sectoral policies and laws that guide their implementation. So those sectoral laws, it is our responsibility to ensure that all those laws have recognized health as a right, have recognized water, sanitation as a right, and so on. So, Mr. Speaker, what we suggested in the committee, that one, this bill would call upon those in the different sectors to mainstream or to recognize the responsibility to implement in all their sectoral policies and laws and ensure that they're there. Mr. Speaker, because the enforcement or the oversight role has been given to the Article 59 commissions and the Gender and Equality Commission in particular, which was asked to actually put in place standards, we need to find a way in which Parliament can oversight on the entire process. Parliament's role is to represent, to legislate, and to oversight. So this law should come up with guidance on how we can hold the Article 59 commissions responsible in respect of the mandate given to them to implement, to oversight the implementation of Article 43 rights. It should equally provide the standards that Parliament can use to enforce the implementation of these rights by the executive. So the recommendations we have made in the committee report was basically to amend this law so that it specifically calls upon possibly a joint committee or relevant committees in the two houses that deal with human rights, with a requirement to put in place a mechanism and a standard that can assist us in measuring progressive realization of these rights. Mr. Speaker, these rights happen to align with the SDGs. They happen to align with, in the previous government, some of the big four. They align with the manifesto that the current government wishes to implement. So all we are saying in terms of implementing or enforcing these rights is trying to put in place a mechanism that can enable Senator Boni and the rest of Senate to be able to go to Kakamega and find out if only so many percentage or so much percentage of citizens of Kakamega are able to access primary health care in 2023. What measure are we going to put in place so that we are able to find out whether that measure is better come 2026? Are we able to tell the Kenyans that through our evaluation mechanism, we are able to tell Kenyans that we are making progress insofar as facilitating access to the right to health in Kakamega County is concerned? Equally, we would be able to find out whether we are clawing back. Maybe Tana River was at a particular percentage in facilitating access to water. But 2 years later, we find, in fact, that percentage has dropped. We would be able to measure to find out we are actually clawing back on these rights. So this is a very important bill. It's an important bill that we must carefully ensure that we have crafted it in such a manner that it will not be a dead law. It will be a law that will actually enable us to hold people accountable. It is a tool that, in fact, the Auditor General can use to try and measure performance. In our conversation with the Auditor General recently, we talked about performance auditing. This is one of the tools that will facilitate performance auditing, because we will be able to know what is the impact of giving so many billions to County X. What has it delivered, what has it not delivered? We will also be able to tell when a governor is leaving, when the governor comes in, what did you find in place? As you are leaving, are you leaving that county in a better position, or are you leaving it in a worse off position? So, Mr. Speaker, as we support this bill, I would want to urge that we collectively work as a Senate with Senator Mungatana to take into account all the issues that I've discussed, including the discussion of the Equalization Fund, Mr. Speaker, which is discussed and factored in the PFMA Act. But this bill has not made that cross-reference. So, in fact, the bill suggests that socioeconomic rights should be implemented using the Equalization Fund. It was the view of our committee that the Equalization Fund is an affirmative action fund intended to handhold the areas that were historically marginalized. It was not the tool for implementing. In fact, the basic budget or the primary budget of government is the place that should actually hive off the money for implementing the right to health, hive off the money for implementing the right to water, hive off the money for implementing the right to housing, but the Equalization Fund can only come in to handhold the regions that have lagged behind because they were historically marginalized.
Honorable Senators, Senator Catherine Muma, you will have your 7 minutes to conclude on your comments when the House resumes. Honorable Senators, it is now 6:30 p.m., time to adjourn the House. The Senate therefore adjourns until tomorrow, 12th April 2023 at 9:30 a.m.